Hello, Ash. I'm just getting started here. I'm a little late live. I'm gonna start off with the brush. This brush pen. So I'm glad I get to use this. This is the first of the art cards that I get to use it. Now, when these cards are scaled down to a small size, I don't know if anyone's gonna notice the line quality, but um, or if even the color would probably cover some of that up when I color it. But um, I will be doing prints that are 1-to-1 scale. Yes, I'm glad you were able to catch a live. I haven't been able to go live for the last 2 weeks, so this is my return to the lives. Oh, you've been going live at the same time? Is that a coincidence? Or was that uh like adopting some of that what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say template. Hello, Kaylee. Long time no speak. Who is this stranger? Are you talking about the orc? The orcs? Oh, just when you have time. I've been so busy and it doesn't end. I am really glad to be inking one of my cards again. I actually finished one of the other ones off the live. I was like, you know what? I have time to work on it. I was like, let me just do it, not save it for the live. I did record the process though, to some of it anyway. So that will be a video. Oh, me. Yeah, it's been a while. I'm new around these parts. For anyone who is also wondering who I am, my name is Jake Grave. I'm a comic book writer and artist. No particular order. I just, anyways, I have a free to read series you can read on the Graveyard Comics Facebook page or on my TikTok. I have a free to read series in the playlist that I'm calling Nadir Archives, and that's the name of that anthology series. I also have some published books. That's my main series called Dead Liberty. That is not in the same universe as my free to read series. Oh, your mom got you a gift. Do you know what it is, or is it a surprise? Do you guys still not hear the music, by the way? I was hoping that my time away, maybe, I don't know, maybe the music would be back. I don't know. I guess that's wishful thinking, huh? Oh, you know what it is. So now it's just a matter of it arriving. I just want to say I have a comic series. I know some people are like, we just heard that. I saw a spike in the viewership, so like I gotta say it real quick. This video was brought to you by Graveyard Comics. I have a free to read series you can read on the Graveyard Comics Facebook page or on my TikTok account. We also have a Discord channel if anyone's interested in joining that. We have the coolest people on Discord. You can get updates on my projects, progress, any things I'm working on. You can share your own artwork in the general art channel and just talk amongst people. I also recently added a letter column uh, forum, which I think is pretty cool. Hello, Uzi Poozy, and thank you. I'm glad you think this is cool. Um, so what this is, I'm going to be doing a trading card set. There'll be story cards. So they're not playing cards, but on the back of the card is going to have a story kind of explaining what's going on in that particular card, and they'll be numbered through 1 through 55, telling a story. I do plan to explore more of this world in comic series, but I'm already juggling so much with my other comic series that I thought that this would be a cool way to at least let people engage with the that world, that medieval world, as I typically focus more on sci-fi stuff. So I think it's a cool way to, scratch that itch. And I get to draw like monsters and stuff and knights. Hello, the real Spider-Man webs. Ah, so it sounds like it's adult juice, huh, Ash? Okay, you can't hear the music. Thank you for answering that. Sometimes I'd feel pretty hyped when I'd have like some upbeat music and I'm drinking like an energy drink and I'm all excited. So I feel like it's kind of sad that you guys can't hear the music. Can't match my energy. Right now I'm kind of drained, kind of beat right now though. I'm drinking some coffee, taking it easy. I worked today. I worked out last night and I'm sore. Uh, I hadn't had a chance to work out for like 2 weeks, so I was excited to return, and my body noticed the difference from my little sabbatical, as I am very sore, and I only got like an hour, maybe hour and a half sleep before I had to go to work. So when I came home, I took a nap for like what, like 3 hours maybe. So that nap is keeping me alive, but I'm definitely still tired. As much of an advocate as I am of artists exercising and working out and being active, because us artists sit on our ass for hours at a time drawing, and I say we have to keep working, but also take care of our bodies so we can make more artwork. Hello, Vibes with Neen. Did I say your name right? Neen? So all that advocacy and then I just like not sleeping. So I need to work on that a little bit, especially on days that I work out, because when you sleep, that's when like a lot of the muscle recovery is happening. I look like this guy off camera, actually. I self model. I'm kidding. Maybe maybe 5% this guy's muscle mass. Close enough. Under adult supervision. Who put in their creator tub from W? I just got a hat from W, which was awesome. Little me was so happy. I gotta post that on my blog on the free to read Patreon. I have it actually. I got it right here. Just got it. Um, man, when I was in high school and first like wanting to be a comic artist and stuff like that, I always thought it was cool, how cool would it be to have like sponsors with like energy drinks and stuff like that and repping the merch and the hats and stuff like that. Also, I thoroughly enjoyed Dubby. I drank one yesterday before my workout. So since it's healthier than a lot of other regular, I mean, yeah, it's healthier than a lot of regular energy drinks. It's good for my purposes where, if I'm working out a lot and consistency, I don't want to be drinking too much of the battery juice. You know what I mean? Like every other day. Oh yeah, the mystery flavor is back. It was gone for a while. And I really like the mystery flavor. That's my little brother's favorite. I'm actually running low on my first mystery tub. I've been holding, I've been making that last. Oh, so if you got the mystery flavor, then it's a flavor. It's literally mystery. Um, and it actually has a flavor that you can guess. It's not just random. Originally, I assumed that it was probably just kind of like random mixes of whatever leftover batches they had, but no, it's an actual flavor. And I came pretty close. I guessed it pretty close. Um, and then before they took it out, they announced what it was, what the actual flavor was, and I was like, "Oh," and I was like, "Oh man, I was so close." That's crazy. So since they announced what the mystery flavor was, uh, I was like, "Well, I guess that's not coming back." So I was so glad to see that it's back. Now, if you want a random tub, that's when it's called Chef's Choice. That's when they give you, a random flavor. So you can get a different any flavor really. Okay. Okay, you got the one where they pick. Okay, so that's Chef's Choice. Hello, Yi. Are you still here? I see we only got like two people here. Yes. Hello. Just making sure you're here before I answer your question, and then you come back and I have to repeat myself. So, in all honesty, I'm very much a story driven person as far as the things that I'm writing. And a lot of the stuff that I'm writing prioritizes war stories. I don't get into like, a lot of crazy drama or things like that or, you know, uh what's the word I'm looking for? I want to say my work is much especially if we're talking about like fantasy. I think we're seeing a lot of a simplification, not simplification, a sidestep from some of the more darker tones and things like that. So I know I'm long-winded. So in short, I'm gonna say no. But as I kind of go deeper into my response, I think there is a it's kind of hard to word like I don't know. I don't know if I'm making sense. I wanna write a good story. Yeah. I'm not trying to be like, "Oh, you can mate with is the orc breedable?" No, it's not. It's it's a monster. It's not just a green person. I feel like a lot of the fantasy stuff these days have really become very castrated, if I can be blunt. Uh, and it had put me off from fantasy. I was never a fantasy person, and looking at some of the older fantasy stuff, that's when you see, well, okay, it wasn't always like this. And so I guess I kind of also want to bring back the dark to dark fantasy. Um, Again, also too, as for other elements, because I know someone might say, "Oh, can you just add it into the story?" I personally wouldn't feel comfortable adding that into the story or any of my stories, as I am actually a religious person. So I think that is something that's a little harder to, you know, can it exist? Sure, it's a big world. Will I highlight it? Will I bring it to the spotlight? No, not in good conscience. And I don't want to sit here and like mislead anyone. So, I'm very open about my beliefs on that, and I try to be as respectful as possible. But I am sorry to disappoint. I feel the ink's running a little low on this. But as I was saying before too, I was doing I'm more of a sci-fi person. I typically do more sci-fi stuff and then war stuff. Sci-fi war stuff, but I've been getting more into some of the fantasy stuff. Like I like knights and stuff like that. Originally, I was never gonna have orcs in my comic. It's not a Tolkien comic. It's not a Lord of the Rings copy. It's not some D&D campaign that I just ported over. This is something I'm actually just making um, and wanting it to be different. I think coming from someone who grew up not really liking fantasy at all, um, I think I will have a very different flavor from a lot of the stuff that's probably oversaturating the market at the moment. Um, but yeah, I think yeah, good versus evil. I allow for some nuance, of course, on how much is good, how much is evil. But there's certain things that I have very clear direction in my writing. I'm not just chasing trends. I'm not just writing, you know, dumb, fun. I think about everything. I put a lot of science into my work. I really go heavy into the science. Um, and So even if it's something like fantasy, like there's not like real magic in the world, and you can really dive deep into the lore and build up for a lot of the stuff. The cat's trying to eat my food. What food do you have? What is your cat trying to get? Thank you, Fanchun. I like fantasy if it's done right. So what fantasies do you like? What fantasies don't you like? For me, uh, what kind of got me into fantasy was Berserk, which also kind of got me into anime because I didn't like a lot of anime. I still don't really like anime. But three of my favorite things happen to be anime, which is Berserk, Neon Genesis Evangelion, and Mobile Suit Gundam. So Berserk is like the anime for people who don't like anime, and kind of my entry level drug into anime and fantasy. And then from fantasy too, I was already really big into like Bloodborne, and then Dark Souls is the same people who made Bloodborne, and Dark Souls is basically like Berserk the video game. And I just got really big into Berserk, and then of course years later, Elden Ring came out by from Soft. Um, and then I got into like Warhammer, and then from Warhammer, ended up getting into Warhammer Fantasy and Age of Sigmar. But that took a bit longer too, because I was never really into like, I don't really like when there's elves and dwarves and stuff like that outside of Lord of the Rings, because I feel like, at that point, Tolkien really came up with a lot of those things or those images of those type of characters. like elves were like small creatures and stuff like that in folklore. These big, elegant, immortal beings is very much a Tolkien creation. So anytime I see it in something else, it makes me think of Tolkien, and then it reminds me that I'm reading fiction. And I know, oh, but it's fantasy. Yes, but I think, me personally, I feel like I want to get lost in that world. I want to be imagining that universe and get fully immersed. If I reading something and it takes me out of the world, with some contemporary thing or something like that, it just even certain things like, and I just to go how extreme I am, the word orc really comes from Tolkien itself. When I was hesitant to use it, but orc he got from another word that meant monster, and I forget the full term, but he shortened it to orc. Yes, exactly, Eldritch. Hello. Uh, so elves were dwarves were spirits of nature. Same with things like goblins. And I've been looking a lot into that. It's like these little sprites and fairies and elves. It makes me think. How much. I don't want to go full conspiracy theorist, but why do so many cultures have the same thing? It's like, why do we all have our own Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yeti, skunk ape? Why do we all have this big ape creature? Why do we all have these little sprites from gremlins, goblins, fairies? So it's like, it's interesting to think about as far as that way. Now, if you have goblins that are more creature like and orcs that are more creature like, then that's very much Tolkien esque. And by extension, fantasy as a whole, as Tolkien really much is a godfather of our modern fantasy. So originally, when I added orcs and goblins into my story, they were originally not going to be in it. When I added them, they were going to have a very small part, and it was more of a consideration showing respect to fantasy fans, because who's this guy, right? Who's this guy who talks about how he didn't like fantasy and he's coming in and making a fantasy story? So the one thing about art is we can make something we don't like, we can make it cool. And one thing I don't like, I really don't like orcs when they just look like green people. I don't like orcs when they're like, like World of Warcraft looking, or ponytails and all the rings in their faces. I think they kind of look a little too human for me. They look a little weird. I want an orc that looks like a monster. Maybe you like those orcs. Maybe you hate my orcs. That's fine. But I like to draw them this way, and I draw them like these, hulking monsters. I would say my favorite orcs would be the ones from Warhammer, and the ones that Tolkien did, because he started it, so he gets a pass on everything of the things that I don't like in high fantasy. For the people who dig deeper into this comics, there is a lot more to it. Yes, absolutely. I appreciate you mentioning that, Ash. Um, yeah, I put a lot of foreshadowing. I put a lot of references. Um, I like to say, you know, I spend so long drawing that I want to show as much of the story as I can, and I really go into this thing that I've wrote this capstone thing on what I call implied writing. Um, and so that goes kind of like deeper into things, kind of like how you probably see Dark Souls would have like their bios being like what I call deliberate wording, or their environmental storytelling of things in the maps and stuff like that in video games. I take much more inspiration from video games than I do other comic books. For food, it's Subway. I love Subway. What sandwich did you get? So for books, I like a little spice with dragons and magic, as long as the magic is written well and there's a set of rules on how it works. Okay, that's a good point, because that's the next thing I wanted to talk about, Ash. There's two camps for magic. There's magic systems, and then there's where I like to lean towards when it comes to quote unquote magic, sword and sorcery, which is a subgenre of fantasy. And I think my stuff would fall more into the sword and sorcery kind. The only thing is I don't want to call it sword and sorcery. because it's not like there's a lot of sorcery. There is spiritual elements that happen. It's but it's not really common. And sword and sorcery is not very common either. But there's an argument to be made between the two camps of people who really like fleshed out magic systems. And I feel like video games do this the best. No shocker, right? But I'll go into why. Because let's say we have Harry Potter. You know, that's something that they study the magic. This spell does this. You know what to expect from it. And I think when it comes to writing and stuff like that, I don't really I like when things have a specific meaning. Like, for example, Batman's utility belt. I want to know what is in each pocket. I don't like knowing that Batman can just have a utility belt, anything, whatever happens. It's a good thing I packed that shark repellent spray. I kind of really don't like when Batman's utility belt is just the Dios Machina of all things, you know? So that's why, again, video games does it really well when you have the Arkham series and you know all the things you have, you know, the different batarangs and gear and you know it's creative because you know how to use that thing for the given situation. And I always like to compare to the Mach 5 and Speed Racer, how they would have some episode, like a thing between episodes that would kind of like show what every button on the Mach 5 does. And I think that is really cool. Um, because then you kind of think, how do I use what I have available to me as a writer to get my characters out of a situation? And it feels fair to, you know, take a character out of a situation and you're like, oh, I forgot he had that. So I love that. But when it comes to magic, some people don't like it because they feel like it takes the magic out of magic and they feel like it becomes a commodity. You know, it's like, oh, it's just something that people can master and we know what to get input, output. And where sword and sorcery, it's much more from a kind of an outside view when someone does magic. And oftentimes the magic is dark. You know, it almost always comes at a cost to dabble with magic. Um, and so for me, I kind of like to lean more on that sense because it allows for, you know, it's darker, it's dark forces. Again, I'm a religious person. So when it comes to magic, I'm also a very scientific person. So that was one of the things with me with fantasy. It was always really hard to wrap my mind around magic, and I'm like, oh, it doesn't exist, you know. So how can magic just exist? And so I always had a hard time with magic as a kid, you know, being such a scientific sci-fi guy. Uh, but you know, but I do believe in the supernatural, and so if magic is more along the lines of the supernatural, you know, if magic is just miracles outside, you know, it's like okay, but then how do miracles work? And so, as far as the sorcery and stuff in my comics and things like that for the medieval series, very much treating it kind of like biblical miracles. But of course, I want to have a darker approach to it. Um, and so it adds that element of like alien, you know, kind of it's foreign, it's creepy, you don't know how it works. And even the people who master it can still succumb to it and become victim to it. You know, if you know it's a force they can't fully understand, and that's where you know there's the sword and sorcery camp. But some people really like their magic systems, and they're like, no, this thing got to do this. I got to understand how it works, and probably for my reason that I mentioned before with like the Mach 5. Um, but then there's also video games. So this is why I love like the magic in Dark Souls and stuff like that because you could see like the magic people who have like a magic build, they earn that. You know, they leveled up their intelligence and their attributes in different fields and you know, they worked for it while someone like me who's a knight will just pick up a sword and level up strength and dexterity and stuff like that. While these guys are like unlocking spells, they're reading what the spells do. You know, in Dark Souls, there's like a limited amount of health you can have. But with like the magic and stuff, you can heal yourself. You can do ranged attacks. You could be like a glass cannon. And while it's kind of annoying to fight a magic user, and you're just like, when I get my hands on you, Ricky, I'm gonna slam my giant sword on your head. Ooh, it's so satisfying to kill a magic user because you kind of feel like it's like, oh, he got extra health than me, or he got more ranged attacks than me. It kind of feels unfair, but it's like to you it's foreign because you didn't look at all the stats and read and all that, while this person took that time to do that. And so for them, they know how all the magic works, but it's still foreign to other people outside of it. So I think Dark Souls and Elden Ring and stuff like that, in video games maybe, by extension, handles magic in probably one of the best ways possible in that sense. I tend to hate fantasy when it's written all over the place and magical world has no set rules to it. And they're just people who are way too strong, way too overpowering. I typically don't really like overpowering anything, even superheroes. That's why I was never big on Superman. Um, but I guess when it comes to sword and sorcery, I guess that's what keeps the rule in place is that it's like, yeah, you can have that. Yeah, you can perform that, you know, but it'll cost you. So, it kind of balances out in that sense. Yeah, you can do anything, but it'll cost you. This is why me and Minion and a few others love looking into Jake's comics so much more than what most would because he puts so much into them. I really appreciate that. That made my day. I always like coming onto the lives and talking to you guys, but every once in a while I'll get comments that I'm like, I needed to hear that today. I needed to be reminded, because sometimes I'm just like, I'm working. I'm not in the Discord all the time, so I'm just working on school, college. I'm working on my finals. I'm working on other work. I'm working on commissions. I'm working on the Patreon cards. I'm working for Dynamite Comics. I'm just working nonstop. And so it is good to, be reminded that people haven't forgot about me or my writing and my stories and my series. I love Jake's comics because of the depth to them. And I love how it makes me think because uh it makes me think makes me want to keep going because I want the answers. I love that. And that's one of the best things about mystery. You know, I could have just answered questions and stuff and show it, but I like allowing people to feel like an active participant, almost like a Rubik's cube. Like they're playing with the idea and trying to figure things out and like, what was that in the background? Why did he take the time to draw that? What happened there? What's happening in this picture? Although this one might spell it out for the most part, the back of the card is going to be like, oh, orcs, blah, blah, blah. They do this or that. But even then, there's certain things that, it may not address. Like you got this knight reaching out for this woman here that's just being lifted up by her hair. So, um, is there a connection there? Maybe he just wanted to save her. Maybe he's just a chivalrous knight and he's just like, no, I couldn't save her in time. Or maybe that's someone he cared about. There's so much that we can go into. But my comics, the comic books, definitely go in a lot more where, these cards are kind of just a snapshot in time and, you know, can vary between one card to the next as far as how much time has gone by. But for a comic, there's moment to moment, panel to panel, page to page. So with these being cards and not moment to moment, I really want them to kind of feel like a work of art. And, there was a lot of thought that went into composition. If I had this character smack in the center, that was very tricky for me because I'm like, how do I put things in the background now without having it too covered, especially because we have like three focal points on this one character smack in the middle. This was very challenging and I'm very proud of myself. I'll explain. So maybe you get some tips here. So we have focal point one, the character's face. Focal point two, another character's face. One of the knight's decapitated heads, or his helmet rather, but I assure you the head's in there. And then the axe. Now this double-headed axe, battle axe, is covering a large part of the body here, or what I can fit back there. So I'm like, damn, I was gonna have these guys fighting, and I'm like, it's gonna cover too much of the knight. So my very kind orc here was like, here, let me help you get a lift so you're not covered. And so he just lifted him up for me. I'm like, oh, awesome. I was keeping in mind like the cape and stuff because the axe was kind of, you know, ending kind of too close to the body. And so breaking up the silhouette, I've kind of adjusted the cape to a point where I can be around the axe. Since I'm going to be doing color, it'll help even more. But I don't ever want to depend on color. I think you should have a strong foundation in the black and white stage and the drawing. Because even if it was color, let's say I had a tangent and the cape went right up to the same line as the axe, it would hurt the eye. You can't really pop out sections then. Also, I do have red on the axe. I have blood splatter all over the axe, so your eye would mix that up together. So just little things like that, and then keeping my focal point here, I had to put this guy over here, and keeping with the idea of being lifted up, kind of helping a little bit to not interfere with the primary things that you're looking at. I put some swords in the ground. Some people probably got felled, so it's cool because it kind of feels like a frame. I have my foreground, I have my foreground, middle ground, background, and extreme foregrounds. I have these swords really close in the foreground and kind of almost acting as a frame, the way I put it, that it's kind of set up to the eye. With this character up here, it's kind of like a triangle, and then I have to fill in the negative space, and so that's how I'm thinking about it. I'm really putting a lot of thought into these card compositions and trying to make them feel like just, a work of art, a standalone work of art. Where in comics, the panel's primary goal is convey the action, what happened next. You cannot confuse the reader on what's happening next. Well, this is more of like a panoramic kind of scene. Did I use the word panoramic right? I'll find out in post. All right. Tricep is underrated muscle to draw, maybe. The tricep is the biggest muscle on the arm, and I feel like arms are really fun to draw, especially when you get to like the elbow area. I love how everything connects in the elbow. Deltoids are also pretty fun to draw too. Definitely look into Tuatha de Danann in Irish mythology. If you're interested in that kind of stuff. 100% took inspiration from that and has FromSoft, to be honest. Oh, so FromSoft has taken inspiration from that? Yeah, a lot of these things take a lot of inspiration from Irish mythology. They have like a gold mine of stuff. Those quad teardrops are kind of fat. You beefy boy. um, One of the books I read, the magical system was all in the swords they use. Oh, that's interesting. So the swords kind of act like, I don't know, conduits. And another book, the person used the dragons to ground them. You drew too much magic power and it turned you evil. And I hate it when they can keep drawing power. Long story short, love magic when there's a cost to taking too much. Yes, I think uh I think you will like my story as well because I have a lot of stuff as far as like when I write some of these characters, I feel like they kind of remind me of our fellow specters trying to read into my stuff and find out answers as there's a lot, it's like the readers are not just people who want to know what's going on in my worlds. The people in my worlds want to know what's going on in my worlds, and there's specific groups of people that are like dedicated to finding knowledge and trying to find out these, forbidden knowledges and the things deeper beyond what I show. And then they just, it's just too much for a lot of characters who really get too deep into it. I use the PvP in Dark Souls 3 mostly. You ever tried Chivalry? No, I have not played it. Hello, average COD player. Is that on Xbox? Lately, I've been confined to only being able to play Xbox cloud gaming games. For me, I hate comics normally because there just isn't enough to it. But with yours, There is, which is why I read them. It feels like a book with pictures. I love to hear that because I know you like reading novels, and to hear that that's one of the reasons you don't like comic books, but mine is kind of the exception is very flattering. I really appreciate that it's in the it's like a person who likes books is kind of like that one gets a pass, and because it's not just dumb fun. I feel like a lot of comic books oftentimes are seen as like a lesser medium, or for kids, or it's like, oh, there's not as many words, but I'm like a picture is worth 1,000 words. So a picture from me is probably worth 10,000 words. And so I really put a lot into the context. Because here's the thing: when it comes to reading a book, I feel like a lot of the stuff oftentimes can be spelled out for you. It's like the battle the end of the battle had you know shit. Hold on, let me restart that. So you're reading a book, it'll be like, the muffled screams in the distance, blah blah blah, swords lay in the ground, uh an orc holds the severed head of a felled knight, but what I like about visual storytelling is I don't have to spell it out for you. If you look at it real quick and you turn the page, all right, you got to see some orcs. But if you really look at it and you're like, is that somebody's head in his hand? Is that a dead guy back there? There's a knight over here, and there's an orc over here, and the orc has a spear through him, and the knight has an axe through him. Maybe these two guys died in like epic combat. Maybe uh he got hit with the axe, and then he plunged the spear in one final moment of his heroism. The orcs have like, oh shit, is that a skull? They're trophy takers. I'm not spelling things out. The more you look at it, the more you find things that you can imagine him scalping someone, and cleaning out the skull and just tying it to his belt. Like, yeah, this is my little boo boo. That guy's big boo boo is my little boo boo. So you know that's one of the cool things is you found it. You experienced it. You came in, you're like, "Oh shit, what happened here?" And I not to discredit like books and stuff, but I think that's one of the things if you're writing whatever medium you're in, whether it's a video game, whether it's a comic book, whether it's a movie, you got to lean into what your, specific medium benefits from having that exclusive nature to. In my case, visual storytelling. A Fibonacci swirl, like the golden ratio. I kind of do keep in mind the golden ratio, but I focus more. I think it's easier to kind of keep in mind the rule of thirds, because just keep in mind like if this is like a grid, it's like boom, boom. So I can have a focal point here. I can have a focal point here. Um, but I do think about the swirl. I start with the rule of thirds, but then I think of the swirl as far as like when I'm putting things in the background, how I'm framing things with things in the background, not interfering, avoiding tangents and things like that. When I get my cards, would you want me to film my reaction? If you want, you don't have to. If I know some people would, it's like camera shy and stuff. But I would like to know when you get them. That was my first time mailing outside of the US. As far as magic taking too much, and I have said this, I don't know, it's Wheel of Time. In Wheel of Time, the Dark One, equivalent of the devil, has corrupted the whole male half of the power, which is a source that very few can tap into, and because of that, any male has born to be able to tap into the power without exception is destined to go insane and go on a maddening rampage where they have known if the women users of the power don't stop them to level cities. Oh, so they can level cities, but the females have stopped them. No, I understand. That must be frustrating running out of space. It kind of made me think of that anime Claymore. Have you heard of Claymore? You probably have. You're a big anime person. Hello, Yi. I will definitely do that as I was going to post them on my page. Yeah, I'd love to hear that. I'd love to see that. Oh, I left my brush open this whole time. Let's see. Let's see if it wants to work. No, it's so finicky. It works when it wants to. Let me grab a scrap paper real quick. Let's see if we can get the juices flowing. Look at this. I need to buy another one of these brushes. Someone said to shake it, hitting it on my desk. Ow, I hit my finger by accident. I missed the desk and I cracked my finger on the thing. No. Rest in peace, pen. You have served me well in the later half of your life. So, brush. Two halves of the power, which is magic, and the devil put a piece of his essence to the male half, and the male half is generally the stronger side. So it's a scary idea that the whole half is gone. Now, keep in mind the line weight variation. I'm using a thicker pen for these here, which are in the extreme foreground. But with it being so close, I'm even going as far as to be a little gutsy and using a brush pen. So I'll put that to the side, and I'll use the 08 for the sword that's over here. Dark One of the Devil's true name in the book is actually Shay Tan. Shay Tan? Kind of sounds like Satan. I wonder if that's on purpose. What do orcs do in their pastime? They're trophy hunters. They like to scalp people and collect their bones and put them on their armor. They like to hunt. They like to pillage. They're strong, so it's like, you know, it's different because it's like, think about it like this: if you're a human, right, and you go to war and you're a soldier or whatever, you may not like war. You might see the horrors of war, but if you're this monster that's stronger than these guys, you might find it fun to fight, and not so much of like a scary thing of like, oh, I might lose my life, because you're like, oh, I got this. They're little guys. They're weak. Now, I don't make it fun in the sense of like, Warhammer, where the orcs love, like, they just love to have fights. Like, they do it for the love of the game. But I like that in Warhammer, and I wouldn't do it in my story. Um, Also, because I don't want to make it too much like Warhammer in that sense. But I just mean like, in my description as far as like fun, I meant that it's not something that they're concerned about. Like, going out to pillage a village is not really work to them. It's just something they do. Like, oh, it's another Tuesday, you know. But no, but the ones in Warhammer, they really do just love fighting. They love the combat. I would say it would depend on the individual orc, but for the most part, I think they would be impressed. Like, oh, this guy's pretty strong. And also, I think it would also depend to a degree what time period in my story, because there will be like a change that goes on um, throughout like certain points in time. I'm trying not to spoil too much, but like at the same time, I kind of want to be generous because like who knows when the other stuff will end up happening as far as like the comics and stuff. But like during this point in the card sets, they're just orcs by themselves. They're like little war bands and stuff like that. But at a certain point during like the main comic narrative that I have planned, um at that point the orcs will have, groups that will include other creatures that are not orcs, like other goblinoids, which would include things like goblins, um and what else, like they could be working with also some other creatures like, uh you know like a cyclops or something like that. They've become more uh what's the word I'm looking for? They play nicer with other of the savages. Not the lizard people though. The lizard people are kind of like the main kind of like threat as far as like creatures. They're kind of like the more um dangerous. Like a one-on-one fight between a orc and a lizard person, a orc is typically going to be stronger. There are some strong lizard people, but orcs on average are stronger than the lizard people. But the lizard people, they just, they do make their own weapons. They're kind of higher up as far as like civilization goes. The orcs did start getting higher up at some point after this card set and before the comic, so like between they did have a moment, but then they kind of fell back down. So they did improve since the first card set, the the Reign of Solomon, but there was one point their golden age, if we want to call it that, that they've still kind of fallen down from. While the lizard people are pretty unified for the most part, and also one of the things about the lizard people is they are they can train like some of the draconic beasts. So like things like wyverns. So the fact that a lizard person could just have air support, aerial superiority, just dropping in on a wyvern, that's already on its own like really that's like a game changer. Um and I think it'd be cool. Like I'd have some of like the orcs with like some of the lizard people's skulls on them too. So not just human skulls. Some of the lizard people sometimes use the orcs as slaves to help them build stuff because they're physically stronger on average. So those guys don't really get along. The lizard people are kind of stuck up in that way that they're like, oh, we're descendants of dragons. Like they do see themselves to be above everyone else. Are there any incorporeal entities in the world like banshees, ghosts? Yeah. Yeah, when it comes to things like that, I definitely try to be a little more secretive, but I will give you a short answer and say yes. And that's where the things I was talking about, sword and sorcery and the mysticism of things, that's where that kind of comes from. Um, things that go bump in the night. And thank you, Eldritch. I appreciate that. And I'm glad you like it. I was pretty proud of this one as far as my problem solving skills, as I mentioned earlier, with like the composition, putting a pretty ambitious and kind of challenging one as far as like having a character smack in the middle with like their arms kind of covering, not really leaving room for things in the background. So it's, it's kind of fun and challenging as an artist to kind of complete the drawing and try to fill in the, keep in mind everything you add, it's like, okay, now I got a spear through this guy. So now I can't really put anything back here without the spear, blocking something. So I think I'll probably just have stuff like things against the wall here just to fill in the space. But thank you for dropping by. I've done more scenes too. I've been busy in my absence. So I'm curious to see what people will find to be their favorite out of all 55 when I'm done with them. But yeah, I'll let you go before I start talking and then start talking for hours. For this particular drawing, I'm not just gonna do it only on the lives because I got commissioned by a colleague to do a drawing and they wanted the same composition. But with it to be a Game of Thrones theme. And so I'm gonna like light box like the backgrounds and stuff like that. So I want to have those inked in for when I light box that. Uh, but I'll be changing. I'm not gonna light box these guys because they're too beefy for to be humans to put humans in their place, which is not going to be a problem. It's more so the background, just keep it in mind. And it'll be House of Stark. I watched Game of Thrones, I think like 2 years ago. Crazy how time flies. Getting the munchies. Kind of hungry. I got some beef jerky. I'm excited to eat after this. I drew this like weeks ago, the pencils. So it's kind of a shame that it feels like it takes me so long to get around to working on the next one. I mean, sure I've done pencils for some of the other ones, but it's mainly just work with other projects and other things and schoolwork and other, you know, artwork I have to do that takes me away. All right. So as far as our stopping point, I'm thinking maybe we'll get a little bit of the accent here and this leg here. And hopefully I could go live tomorrow. A little drop of white ink in here. So we have like a little chip at the axe. I think that'd be kind of cool. All right. Is anyone still here? I'm about to start heading out. Just sound off if you're still here. Um, Otherwise I'll just do a quick. I'll do it quick. I'll do my goodbye quick. Any last words before I go? Do you hear my computer spazzing out? I know you can't hear the music, but do you hear when it's spazzing out? I'm rather hungry, so once I get off this live, I'm gonna go eat some beef jerky. Can't wait. Alrighty, guys. So I think we made some decent progress, at least on the main figure, as this was black and white when we started the live. So however long we were on live, 79 minutes, maybe like 80 minutes. So whatever ink you see here is what I've gotten done in that time. Oh man, still a lot to go. The foreground stuff's supposed to be the fast part. I put my outro music, but you guys can't even hear it, so we'll just end this way. Alrighty, so next time you see this, it'll probably be finished. Um, because I will be working on this. I'm gonna be putting in some deeper shadows in certain areas as well. All right, so thank you everyone for watching and supporting my videos. Um, watching my videos, reading my comics, anything you do, letting your friends know I exist, letting your friends know I have a free to read comic series. Um, or telling them about the lives or my channels and videos and accounts. That's all extremely helpful. So I'm glad to be back. I've missed a couple of the lives, but I'm hopefully can go live tomorrow. So yeah, thank you so much. Keep working on the things that you like to do. And as always, make it because it doesn't exist and do it because you love it. Enjoy the rest of your night and good night, Spectres.